In 1936, an unidentified flying object allegedly crashed in the Black Forest close to the town of Freiburg. This UFO was reported to have been taken to Wewelsburg Castle, where the Tula and Frill societies, with the technical assistance of the SS Technical Branch, were possibly reverse engineering the non-terrestrial spacecraft. But what evidence remains today? Is it all hearsay, or can we see the results in the technologies we now take for granted?
Aliens Explored is a weekly podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a skeptical perspective, whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Welcome back to another episode of Aliens Explored, a weekly podcast where we discuss otherworldly visitors, UFOs and the like, the strange and mysterious. I'm one of your hosts, Stu Jackson.
And I'm your other host, Neil Kelly.
So welcome back, Neil. How you been keeping?
Oh, I've been keeping very well, thanks. How about you?
Yeah, not bad. Trying to move house at the moment, so it's all a bit during lockdown, not the right time, but, you know, needs must when the devil drives.
I suppose, yeah, if you got to move, you got to move.
Yeah. Timing's a bit off, but hey-ho, we get on with these things. But the listeners don't want to hear all about that, do they?
They don't. They want to hear about
UFOs.
About UFOs.
And we've got a cracker for today because we are talking about the 1936 Black Forest UFO crash.
Otherwise known as the Freiburg disc.
The Freiburg disc, absolutely. I'm glad you've been doing your research, Neil.
I thought it'd be good if I turned up at least having some idea what we're going to be talking about.
Absolutely. So, I'm guessing. So this is one of the lesser known UFO crashes. Obviously predating the famous one, Roswell, by quite some years.
Although it has led to an awful lot of speculative fiction about Nazis with flying saucers and Nazis living in Antarctica post-war, a lot of conspiracy theories. It's fueled all that sort of thing, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And even parody films like Iron Skies and... Yeah, but that's the question, though. How much of it do we think is fiction and how much reality? So I'm guessing that before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, this was one that you'd not heard of previously?
No, I hadn't. No, I mean, I'd heard of some of the references in the Frill and Tula societies, the SS Entwicklungsstelle, the development wing. But no, I hadn't actually heard that there'd been a UFO crash in Nazi Germany. As you say, all the references are to Roswell. When the term flying saucer was first coined, I think. No one had used that term before then.
Well, indeed, so to give the listeners a bit more of an in-depth, I mean, we do our introduction, don't we? Which
we do, yes.
After the event. But to give a bit more of a, because you mentioned it, now you pronounced it Tula Society?
Tula.
Tula Society. I always thought Thule, but then it's a word I've only ever read.
Germans don't really say th. It's always tu.
Chula. Chula and Vril. So the I suppose the theory is that in 1936 a UFO crashed in the Black Forest in Germany, and yes, you've got. Do you want to explain what Chula and Vril societies were? They
were almost occult groups that were obsessed with all things occult, and it was. I think it was those societies, with the technical assistance of the SS technical branch, are believed to have tried to reverse engineer a flying saucer.
Indeed, this particular one that crashed in Schwarzwald.
Yeah,
I believe.
And of course the Chula and Vril societies. The Nazis sent an expedition to Antarctica, didn't they? They laid claim to land there. They went to Tibet, I believe. They went to various places to try and pick up. Well, they were basically looking for magical powers, weren't they? Himmler was obsessed with the occult.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the Vril Society, I know they were always associated with sort of magical rituals and the occult and what have you, but the Vril Society in particular were known for chasing after a power source, an energy source, that we now know to be antimatter. They called
it the black sun, didn't they?
Black invisible sun. But they were talking about antimatter. So do you know what? I'm gonna leap straight in with that and say, how did they know about antimatter? Unless it was through something like reverse engineering on a craft like this.
Now, haven't we had encounters with antimatter on this planet? Wasn't there a massive explosion in Siberia caused by antimatter meeting matter?
Was there? I don't know. That's news to me. Tell me about it.
I would have to look that one up, I'm afraid. But I believe that antimatter had been postulated probably in the 19th century, that you have matter, you have antimatter.
I suppose it would have been theorised, and that's fair enough.
I mean, a lot of the Nazi technology, I mean, especially the stuff they were coming out with in the latter stages of the war, although it was surprising, really what they were focusing on was stuff that could be developed and brought into service quickly. And a lot of the technology that they went into the Second World War with was simply they just made greater advances on existing technologies than Britain and France had. For instance, with their rockets, there were rockets used as weapons in the First World War, small ones, or whiz bangs, or whatever they called them. The Nazis had the idea of let's have a much bigger one. Let's have one we can launch at New York with devastating effect, or at least at London, which they actually achieved. So if they were looking at reverse engineering a flying saucer, or even just building some craft of that kind of their own. I mean, this was in the days when most air forces were equipped with biplanes. When the RAF met the Luftwaffe over the skies of France in 1940, the RAF were largely in their Gloucester Gladiator biplanes, which were very good biplanes. I mean, they'd have ruled the skies over the Western Front in 1918. Unfortunately, they came up against the Messerschmitt Me-109 in 1940 and were blasted out the skies. That's why the remnants of the RAF who were defending Britain in the Battle of Britain were the few, because so many of them had been lost in the early stages of the war.
Well, absolutely. And many people see that, in fact, as evidence of reverse engineering from alien technology, because you've got this massive quantum leap of technology that just out of nowhere. And in fact, I mean, so it's known that the Nazis did in fact build flying saucers.
They experimented with them, didn't they?
The Haunebu. Haunebu, thank you. I mean, you're the German-speaking one, so I defer all pronunciations to you. The Haunebu, which was absolutely 100% a flying saucer. I don't think it worked terribly, or what we know of it, it didn't work terribly well, although there is a theory that it actually used a Tachyonator 7 drive developed by
Nikolai Tesla.
Now, I think it drew power from the Earth using Tesla's Earth energy field. I'm not a scientist, but so apologies to listeners for my terminology. But yeah, the Earth energy field, I think it utilised that, but the actual drive itself was either Tula or Vril. I think it might have been Tula Society. Had reverse engineered from this craft in the Black Forest.
Although I have a note here to say that the Haunebu project of 1930 started in 1935, before the Freiburg crash of 1936. So that was another possibility, that it was actually their own flying saucer that crashed at Freiburg.
Well, yes, okay, but it's not to say as well it was the first one. You know,
that's
not
one
that we know of. I mean, I'm inclined to wonder. You know, you hear about Roswell, you hear about the Black Forest. I'm wondering how many of these things have actually crashed that we just don't know about.
Why do they keep crashing if they're all these, these highly advanced technologies that are able to come and visit our planet, either from way, way beyond our planet or from another dimension? And then they crash. They get here in their highly advanced craft and crash. I would be just dubious about reverse engineering the technology from a craft that had crashed.
Well, if you never seen a car before, I mean, cars crash. But let's say you're from a primitive tribe hitherto undiscovered from the Amazon, and you see a car
that's crashed with the driver dead at the wheel, and you think, is this what we want to do? Do I want to be that driver?
Well, if you'd seen the car moving, or if you'd seen glimpses of other cars and how fast they go, and they've got this protective shell, or even if yes, one crashes and the driver survives, yeah, absolutely, you'd want to create your own. You'd want to understand them. You'd want to try and figure them out for yourself. And of course,
sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say, in just the same way, an astronaut who went into space with the Apollo mission in the 60s or 70s would have had quite a detailed technical knowledge of how his craft worked. He would have needed it in just the same way that people who drove cars at the beginning of the 20th century had to have quite a good mechanical knowledge, because these things needed quite a lot of maintenance, and you really had to understand how they worked in order to keep them going. Yes. Or at least be able to pay someone who knew very well how. But if you just to be the driver, just the day-to-day servicing of it that was required to keep the thing going. But when you get into more advanced technology, when you got like a modern 21st century car, the drivers of those cars know very little about what's under the bonnet, if they even know how to open the bonnet. So I can imagine that with spacecraft. You've got a very, very, very advanced spacecraft. The guy flying it doesn't really know much about it at all. He knows how to steer it, and that's about it.
Yeah, so, I can believe that 100%. Now, coming back on, we mentioned Haunebu. That's not the only example of a Nazi let's call it an interstellar or interdimensional, potentially, craft that was theoretically reverse engineered. You've also got the Nazi Bell.
Yes.
Now, I found that one particularly fascinating because it's not just technological. This really comes into your Tula and your Vril Society stuff, because that did work on what we now perceive, well, what we call magic and occultism.
Yeah. I certainly found references to all sorts of like Victor Schauberger's Repulsine, I guess a jet engine around the time of World War II.
Yeah.
And they've got an artist's impression of a Haunebu type German flying saucer, which does just look exactly like something out of Flash Gordon. It is exactly as you'd expect a flying saucer to look.
Yes. Indeed. So you've got examples of actual Nazi flying saucer. Even if this crash in 1936 was a Nazi-built flying saucer, it means they've got flying saucers. And where have they got flying saucers from?
Well,
where have they got that kind of technology?
They also had a circular winged aircraft, didn't they? From below, it would have just looked like a disc.
Yeah.
But it was actually a plane, but the wings were sort of big and sort of round.
Yes. But where did these concepts come from? Because they were so far removed from the existing aircraft, and it was such a radical change. It wasn't an evolution.
No, it wasn't, and it was so far ahead. You know, they hadn't. Well, I think the Nazis by this time they had experimented with very primitive jet planes and rocket planes. They didn't get one actually didn't get any serviceable until towards the end of the war. So you have to wonder whether, when they haven't even got an aircraft shape that they know works, that they're trying these different things. They're trying a disc. I mean, had the helicopter been invented by the 1930s? Certainly the gyrocopter had.
Well, Leonardo da Vinci formulated the early concept of a helicopter, did he not?
Yeah, you wonder where they got that idea from. When they just, someone saw a discus and thought, wouldn't it be great if we had a craft like that?
Yeah.
But how would the pilot function in a spinning craft if he's constantly being rotated 360 degrees every few seconds, or several times a second?
Well, that's it. But it's, do you know, if it was one radical idea as a different direction, fine. But you're talking about so many radical changes in technology all of a sudden, virtually overnight. A lot of people, of course, believe that this is where stealth technology comes from. Quite possibly even this specific crash.
Although stealth technology is a reaction to radar, isn't it? That's what a stealth aircraft basically is. It's one that has a very, very small radar image. It's painted, it's shaped in a special way, and it's painted with special paints that won't show up too well on radar. That's what it's designed for.
It would also work with forms of sonar, I believe, as well, because it's sound dampening as well as light dampening.
Yeah. Although I don't think sonar is used very much for tracking aircraft, is it? It tends to be...
No, we don't.
Well, there was you can still see the remains of it along the English south coast, and they built these sort of curved walls, and they would pick up the sound of approaching aircraft.
Right, okay.
And there'll be someone sat there with headphones on saying, "Oh, I can hear some planes coming." But it was quickly superseded by radar.
that's fair enough. But okay, so it's to counter radar. I mean, there's also, it counters so much because visually they're more difficult to spot, particularly, when the light's low level.
Or even, if you think of science fiction of that time, the Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers films that were made, I think, in the 1930s, that, where their spacecraft do look like saucers. I mean, they fly like planes. They've got a jet engine at the back. But,
I always think they tended to look like rockets.
Although there's definitely the more sort of like a flying car or the flying. There are rockets, but there are also these flying saucer things flying around.
I'm trying to think what sci-fi wise you've got a saucer. Obviously Star Trek famously, you've got the saucer section of the Enterprise. That was designed with in mind. They definitely did not want a rocket shape.
And when was Star Trek written? When was it created?
Oh, 60s.
Really? So
yeah,
it became a TV series.
Out.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're talking way after. I'm trying to think about disc-shaped craft. I'm struggling before the 60s. Your Flash Gordon was definitely rockets.
No, certainly either Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers. I've seen saucer-shaped craft. But they didn't rotate or anything like that. They definitely, it was just a circular winged aircraft, really, or circular winged spacecraft.
Right. Buck Rogers, my brain gets stuck in the 1980s TV series. So I can't really think beyond that. And I'm thinking Battlestar Galactica, going back to the 80s, the Cylon ships were disc-shaped. But perhaps that's something our listeners can tell, tweet us and with your sci-fi disc-shaped craft.
And were they looking to go to space, or were they looking to travel in between dimensions, or were they just looking for a faster aircraft, a faster, more manoeuvrable aircraft that would outgun whatever Britain and France had?
Well, the Nazi Bell was, I believe, either dimensional or time travel orientated.
Using its antimatter.
Yeah,
engine.
It wasn't about travelling in space. It was about, sort of shifting planes of existence or possibly time travel. Or maybe the two things are not as separate as we might think. Now, one interesting theory I've heard about the Black Forest UFO crash and the reverse engineering of this technology into a saucer is that the theory goes that Roswell, the crash at Roswell, was in fact a Nazi UFO that had been reverse engineered.
Yes.
And I quite like the idea of that.
Now, I know there was this Nazi idea about going to Antarctica that they were escaped to, and I believe certain Nazis believed that the Earth was actually hollow.
Oh, the hollow Earth theory. Yeah,
they could go and hide inside this vast underground realm and build their technology there, ready to come out again. So yes, that this was the Nazis flying in from Antarctica or maybe somewhere in South America.
Well, indeed, the hollow Earth theory is one we're going to be talking about in a future episode. So stay tuned for that in a couple of weeks' time. So I think there we have it. So clearly, the one thing we've not really debated or discussed at all is whether or not there was a UFO crash in the Black Forest in 1936.
Yes, something crashed. Whether it was an extraterrestrial vehicle or it was just one of their experiments that went wrong,
or one of their reverse engineered UFOs, indeed. Yeah, so something crashed. It was taken to, and please correct me on the Wewelsburg
in Westphalia, which was Heinrich Himmler's sort of stronghold for all his occult dealings with the Vril and Tula societies and the SS Entwicklungsstelle.
See, doesn't that say something that it was taken there?
Well, it was alleged to have been taken there. It was because they were practicing all sorts of occult things at Wewelsburg, and it was believed that they had taken a crashed spacecraft there for the purpose of re-engineering it, or reverse engineering it.
So I'm hearing a lot of phrases like alleged, or that was what was reported. So to summarise then, where are you on the 1936 Black Forest UFO crash then, Neil?
I think the Nazis were experimenting with all kinds of things, and that was how they were so technically superior, not just at the start of the war, but remained technically superior throughout the war, because they were messing around with shit like this, and probably were probably less careful about the lives of their test pilots and such. But they and also had a very senior people who believed in all kinds of occult magic and would try anything. So I think I'm not convinced that something extraterrestrial crashed. I'm sure all sorts of things crashed, and of course Germany wasn't even supposed to have an air force. I mean, part of the Treaty of Versailles restricted them. That's why one of the reasons why the Germans never really developed any strategic bombing capability, because they'd been prevented from doing so by the Treaty of Versailles. Everything they did, they had to do all sorts of things in secret. They had to train their pilots with gliders. I think they even went into the Soviet Union to secretly train their armies in the 1920s. They had to do all this kind of thing secretly. So who knows what kind of thing they got up to.
Indeed. Well, for my part, I think 1936, I don't think we'll ever really know. Was it terrestrial? Was it otherworldly? But I'm absolutely convinced that there was such a quantum leap in different technologies. All of a sudden, I'm certain they got their hands on some otherworldly technology, some otherworldly craft, and reverse engineered the crap out of it. I think they probably hit stumbling blocks. I think there were probably things that were way beyond their capabilities, but I still think they got an awful lot out of it. And we're seeing that today with stealth technology, with modern aircraft. Absolutely. So,
but there's no suggestion that that's reversed engineered alien technology. It's all been scientifically worked out over quite a long period of time. I think what's quite amazing about the 30s and 40s was how quickly this stuff moved on. That a war that started with cavalry charges on horseback and biplanes ended with ballistic missiles, jet planes, and nuclear weapons.
Well, that's the thing. It's all happened all at once.
Yeah, all in a couple of years.
Short space of time. Yeah, absolutely.
But of course, I mean, things like the atom bomb was in development for a very, very long time. I mean, it was a long time between Rutherford splitting the atom, or Einstein positing his theory of relativity, to Rutherford splitting the atom, to an actual working bomb.
Yeah, well, indeed. But there we have it. Listeners, do let us know what you think in the comments below. You can tweet us, you can find us on Facebook, or you can find us at aliensexplored.com. But do let us know what you think, and don't forget as well, if there's any particular subject of otherworldly visitors that you'd like to hear us debating and discussing, drop us a message and let us know, and if it's of interest, we'll definitely be discussing it. I'm really excited about our next episode, Neil. Do you know why?
Why is that?
We're talking about crop circles.
All right, I'm going to take the task on this one.
Bring it on. So yeah, tune in for that battle royale next time. In the meantime, watch those skies, and that's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Aliens Explored is a Feegle Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored or visit aliensexplored.com.